thank you all for coming tonight. So this ends 2 years in just about 6 months. We're almost to June. So, have you ever done a Bible study that long? I don't know if I've ever done one this long. Well, we're definitely continuing it to something. We'll start in August, so we'll just take a little break. I think August 18th, we come back. So we're still trying to decide on what's next. I've heard some great suggestions tonight. That sounds good. We try to do New Testament after Old Testament. But yeah, Romans and Hebrews. Which would be the two hardest in the New Testament. So I'd rather do Revelation than Romans, but it's probably a good reason to do it. But I better stop gabbing, and we better get into it, because we still have a little bit tonight. So hopefully, I think it's the 18th. Well, it's not a Monday. What's that week? Yeah, I think it's that week. It's a little later than what I wanted, but well, let's take a look at chapter 49. So remember, we had that incredible verse of a book of incredible verses. Yeah, until the coming of the one to whom it belongs, until the coming of the Shiloh. And we really left to wonder, who is the Shiloh? It's Jesus, it's the Messiah. Even before those words were spoken, this one that would bring peace, this one that controls to everything belongs, will come, and it was directed at the family of Judah, which of course is where David arises, but obviously Jesus arises. So it's just so deep in Scripture that the truth of Christ, and hopefully it's rewarding that we've walked this journey, and God finally shared His great love through this family, and it was a blessing for the rest of the world. So, you guys know another name? Yes, ma'am. Yeah. So it's in verse 10. So the scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from his descendants, until, and the New Living is saying, the coming of the one to whom it belongs. And so that is what Shiloh is. We struggle because we really don't know what Shiloh is. It's the name of a place. So it could be related to shalom, which is peace. Or it could be related to the verb shelem, which is to control, to possess, to own. And that's where the modern translation is running, so that it's referring to a person in an adverbial way. So the one to whom it belongs. So Shiloh, S-H-I-L-O-H, Shiloh. So I vaguely remember the hymn. As a child, there's a hymn about Shiloh, but honestly, I don't know if it's in reference to this or not. But anyway, I have to go on. I would stay there all night if I could. Such a great verse. Verse 11. So a little more about Judah. He ties his foal to a grapevine, the colt of his donkey to a choice vine. So this is classic Hebrew poetry. They like to say something and then say it again. Repeat themselves, but use different words to show sort of their command of the language, the artistry here. They can use multiple words to give you like a full picture of this. So obviously, if you tie a colt or a foal to a grapevine, what is it going to do? It's going to have lunch. It's going to enjoy itself. And grapevines are one of the most protected things that you'll grow in Israel, because two-legged little bandits have a way of coming and getting it, right? In biblical times, they build watchtowers, which are little garden houses where you can stay out when your produce is in harvest so you can protect it. And so this is kind of a beautiful image that it'll go so well for Judah that they won't even care that the donkey is eating the grapevine. That life is going to be a rich blessing for them. Now, that's not the only thing that'll happen, but it is one of the things. So we get this continued connection to the grapevine and to grapes. He washes his clothes in wine. Again, they're repeating it. His robes in the blood of grapes. So here we're getting a little bit more, but a little bit deeper. That the thing that Judah will be known for is the grapes that cover everything, or the blood that covers everything. And of course, that's what ultimately we think of Jesus, that he is the blood of the Lamb that covered the whole world. And so here a frail, old, dying Jacob is being whispered to, I believe, by God, and he's seeing the world changed by this one son. Verse 12 is really a challenge to translate, but I think we've gotten there. His eyes are darker than wine. His teeth are whiter than milk, which is kind of a funny description of a person. But not that you all know, but when you look into your wine cup and it's a dark wine, what do you see? Yeah, nothing or a reflection. It's their sense that there is a sparkle in the eye, so that if you look at a dark wine, and sometimes it has that little light, the shining coming back to you. They're not saying necessarily that he has dark eyes, but that he has a sparkle. We would say a light in his eyes, a sparkle in his eyes. But poetically, they're still trying to tie it to the wine. It's interesting. And white teeth have always been important in human behavior, not just that they're white, but that you have them. So I really remember that painter who did all the disciples. He was from Tulia. And what is his name? Kenneth Wyatt, yeah. I always wanted to talk to him about, he did many, many, many things right. But one of the things he probably didn't do right is the teeth. And we forget what great shape our teeth are in for our age. And I know, looking at a lot of ancient mummies, I told you all about this, a little stint in the University of Memphis. They had a little museum, had 12 mummies, so I got to help do the conservation. And even very, very wealthy people in the ancient world had terrible teeth, just because it's hard. They didn't have dentists, they didn't have toothpaste, there's sand almost everywhere. It's getting into everything. They ate too much sugar when they could. So even people probably like Moses, who had a very good life, probably had terrible teeth. It'd be shocking to meet them. They smile like, oh my gosh, you look like a homeless person. Yeah. Yeah, but they were modern people with pretty good teeth. He should have used English people. Yeah. I'm just teasing. No, he did a good job. Yeah, I've heard truck drivers and stuff like that he met. Yeah. So, kind of what sold me on this, Ramses II, which was it's called Ramses the Great. He was really old when he died, but he looked like a 90-year-old with a couple teeth in his mouth. And you would think Pharaoh, of all people, who had his own dentist, would have great teeth, but he did not. So take care of your teeth. They still saw it as something incredible, and that you had white teeth. They're not stained. So again, showing blessing, showing prosperity, showing sort of the richness of God given to this family. And then in very poetic way, it shifts to Zebulun, which is one of the more minor brothers. So let me show you a map. This is a breakdown of the tribe's divisions 400 years in the future. So this is partially Moses, partially Joshua, who divides up the lands for the tribes that come out of Israel. And so they are the 12 tribes. So it's the 10 brothers and then 2 of Joseph's sons. And you see the green in the middle, Manasseh. He is massive. You see Ephraim, the other son of Joseph, just beneath him, and some of the best land. So Zebulun, you have to look for a little bit. It's way up north and sort of forgotten. There's a lot of history in their conquest of the land that seems to reflect these events. And so it's definitely prophetic, and it maybe speaks into the behavior of these tribes that Moses would have known of, or that personality elements that Jacob saw would be passed on, or things that God saw in these people that were a little unusual. But so Zebulun will settle by the seashore, and it will be a harbor for ships. His borders will extend to Sidon, or we say Sidon. And so this is, as strange as it sounds, kind of a warning, because on the one hand, this tribe will have access to sea trade that none of the other tribes really do. And it's kind of debated how they got access, because their tribal territory actually doesn't go right to the ocean. But they do seem to have moved west. And the ancient trade route is incredibly valuable. This is why places like Megiddo, Armageddon, are fought over for so long in human history. People want to control the trade routes, and they run up and down the coast of Israel. So all of the gold and the ivory, the grain is coming up out of Egypt, and it's being traded for the silver or the olive oil that's coming from Syria or Israel. Turquoise is coming all the way from Afghanistan, passing through Israel, coming down. Trees from Syria, from Lebanon, are being bought by the Egyptians in massive numbers. So this trade, it is really, really ancient and makes the cities along the coast very, very wealthy. The Canaanites that are the superpowers of their area are the Canaanites that have coastal cities. And one of those is Sidon. There's really 2 big cities of the Canaanites. One is Tyre, and that's, of course, the hometown of Satan. That's what Ezekiel says. And the other is Sidon. And so this is a warning to Zebulun. You're going to be living in, I think we would say, San Francisco. And there's a lot of wonderful things in San Francisco, right, Zebulun? There's a lot of bad things in San Francisco, too. So you need to be on guard. You need to be careful. Doesn't say much more than that. Issachar, another one of the smaller tribes, is a sturdy donkey. Golly, lay off the donkeys. But this is their work truck. This is what they lived around the most. Some of our reading of Abraham and his family gives us a false sense of camels and cattle and just the extreme wealth that came with Abraham's family, where the day-to-day really was the old pickup trucks, the donkeys. It's funny, the Egyptians almost always relate Semites with donkeys. You know, they're never far apart from each other. It's funny, we have interns that have come, 6 of them, which is very hopeful, started today, working in the church, looking at possibly going into ministry. And so we were asking them, what's your first impression of Midland? And, you know, they're from Lubbock and Amarillo, and so we thought they'd have a pretty good. They say our trucks are big here. They're bigger than farmer trucks because we have the big, you know, wheelies or whatever. But yeah, we have big trucks here. So trucks, donkeys, it's the same thing. So Issachar is a sturdy one, a dependable, you can rely on it, resting between 2 saddlebags. And this is also a very difficult passage to translate. It's an idiom. Does yours have anything else? Among the sheep pen, yeah, which is more literal. Um, but the way they seem to be using it is it's in the sheep pen, but it's what you pile up on either side. And so we try to get that image that the donkey is right in the middle, and he's got the goodies on either side. When he sees how good the countryside is and how pleasant the land, he will bend his shoulder to the load and submit himself to hard labor. So when you see what the potential is, when you see the good is, you will be like that sturdy donkey, and you will be able to take the load. You know, people love to quote, the Lord will never give you more than you can handle. This is saying the same kind of thing, that when you see what God is doing, you'll know that the labor is worth it, that there is that sturdy donkey within you that can hold the load. So again, he's going through quickly these, his dying breaths here. Dan will govern his people like any other in the tribe of Israel, which in English sounds really bad. He's just like everybody else, but it's kind of a term of endearment that you do well like everyone else. You're going to take care of your people. But then this warning, Dan will be a snake beside the road, the poisonous viper along the path that bites the horse's hooves, so its rider is thrown off. I trust in you for salvation. Okay, they use a very different word here. I didn't know it for snake, serpent. We have seraph that we know, right, from seraphim. You have Nahash, which is more general, snake. But this is a viper. And it's one of the really peculiar creatures that you see in Israel. I'm told they were in Egypt at one point, but you don't see them there anymore. They're like a rattlesnake that has its fangs on its head. It's called a horned viper. I have a picture of one. And I thought they were pulling my foot, when they were describing these things to me. So there it is. It's much smaller than ours. I mean, it's not a big snake. And viper, what it does, it's really designed to eat mice or little animals like that. So it buries itself completely in the sand, and it just sticks those two horns up. So when a little mouse comes along, it jabs those horns, but have its venom, and it injects it in the animal. But they're particularly dangerous for barefoot people, right? Because these things are buried, you step on it, and it jerks. So that's the image they're making here. It's bad for a horse, right? The horses walk along, it doesn't see it either, and it jabs that thing into, and they're vipers, they're particularly poisonous. So Jacob is warning Dan, and again we look at where Dan is. Dan is going to be on the border of the tribal territory. Dan is going to be exposed to sort of the northern Syrian people, which are going to be very violent, very aggressive. And Dan does kind of fall into this mode where they go into guerrilla warfare, where they ambush and raid and do a lot of that. And I don't think God cares so much about their tactics as what happens to your heart when you let yourself become a viper, right? But ultimately, I trust in you for salvation, O Lord. So there's hope for Dan and those people. They are Dan and Gad and Asher. All of these northern tribes are kind of like the canary in the mine. They are the first line of defense of the tribes against the more aggressive northern Syrians and Canaanites, later Assyrians. And so they're going to have a tough time of it, but they're going to fight. So continue with Gad. Gad will be attacked by marauding bands, but he will attack them when they retreat. So not a lot Dad didn't have a lot to say other than, it's going to be bad for you, but you're going to come back. Okay? I wish there was more. Asher will dine on rich foods and produce food fit for kings. So they are both blessed with some access to the coast, like Issachar, or like Zebulun. But the land is also very fertile. We should have a whole night on it. I'm always eager to learn more, like what it's like to farm in Israel. But the soils, for the most part, are terrible in Israel. You see some of this in Jesus' day when they're adding manure to the soil, they're adding salt to the soil to try to get it to grow. It has a very dominant limestone plateau in a lot of it. So there's very few regions, and they're up north, that have good soil. And Asher is going to be one of the ones. Finally, Naphtali is a doe set free that bears beautiful fawns. Okay, that's less than everybody else. So I'm going to marry well and have wild kids. And that's kind of Naphtali. So if we do Exodus, we can come back and see how this bears out. But then sort of the last words are reserved for Joseph. And next to Judah, it is the longest. Joseph is the foal of the wild donkey. So remember way, way, way back, we talked about Ishmael, and we talked about him being compared to a wild donkey. These are different. These are not their domesticated burros that we would know. This is really a type of zebra that had existed. It disappeared like 1912, 1914, shortly beginning of World War I. Out of Syria was the last place they were. But they were just these wild donkeys. The back half of them looked like zebras, and no one was ever able to domesticate them. They were literally just wild like a zebra. And so that's what Jacob is relating Joseph to, that you are just this wild comet of a person. I mean, your life went in a direction that no one ever in our family would have dreamt. That you would be sold off to slavery, that you would go into Egypt, you would have this whole life. You are the wild and unexpected, and then he fills it in, joy, the foal of a wild donkey at spring. One of the wild donkeys on the ridge. So you're one of those people we hear about, but we never thought we'd be related to. Archers attacked him savagely. They shot him and harassed him. The way you really got robbed in the ancient world, for the most part, were people shooting bows at you. They would hide and they would shoot bows. We talked about this. The Egyptians imagined their world to be the Egyptians against the 9 bowmen. And so they would list off all 9 of the groups of people that they hated, that they saw as their enemies. It's interesting, they always said they were bowmen. So swords, spears, all that kind of stuff can be very expensive, but with a little ingenuity, you can make, out of rocks and trees, you can make bows and arrows. So Joseph's life began with him being savagely ambushed, attacked, the equivalent of somebody pulling a switchblade on him. But his bow remained taut, and his arms were strengthened by the hand of the mighty one of Jacob. Now, they're doing some poetry here that we sort of need to get. So there's a name that Jacob has particularly known God by. And it's by way of good review. Can we put up Exodus chapter 6, I believe? So obviously, this is far in the future. This is Moses talking to the people. God talking to Moses and Moses sharing it. And God said to Moses, I am Yahweh, the Lord. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as El Shaddai. We talked a lot about that. It's the El And then they've added the adjective Shaddai, which is translated, probably not perfectly in modern English, as Almighty. But it's something to look for, because we have that same shad, the might, coming on. But what it really means is provide. It's God of the mountains or God of the breasts. So it's a God who always provides for you. And that's certainly how Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob has known God. So we jump back to our Genesis passage. The mighty one, so Shadim of Jacob, has strengthened Joseph. Jacob's acknowledging that. The one that always provided for us, the one that provided the lamb or the ram instead of the sacrifice of Isaac. You know, the one that got Father Abraham in trouble in Egypt. The one that helped us defeat the Babylonian kings. The ones that got us out of Sodom and Gomorrah. It's the same mighty one, Shad, that has helped us in Egypt, has helped your life. By the hands of the mighty one of Jacob, by the shepherd. Remember, that's kind of unique to Jacob. He has very definitely seen God as his shepherd, as the one that follows behind him and pushes him. That's, at least in their thinking, how a shepherd worked. He's a rock of Israel, the foundation, but also very poetic. Why would Israel, whose name was Jacob, say God was my rock? When did he use a rock? As a pillow. Yep. It's real history. He's sharing. I was so poor, I had a rock for a pillow. And you took care of me, and you took care of my son. So then he shifts here to blessing. So this may the God of your father help you. May the Almighty, and this is the Shaddai again, bless you with blessings of the heaven above and blessings of the watery depths below. So they believe that the world is a bubble, and they're not wrong. And above it, in the heavens, are water. That's where the rain comes from. And there's water beneath us. That's where wells come from, or springs. And so they see God has created this little bubble of existence, and there's waters above us and waters beneath us. Incidentally, that's the word for heaven, the two waters, Hashemayim, the heavens. Have you ever wondered why it's plural in English, right, in the Bible? The heavens. It's the two waters, above us and beneath us. So may you be blessed with water and blessings of the breast and the womb. And so for a third time now, they've used the word Shad. Remember, it's the word for El Shaddai. So he really is leading up poetically to what's coming. May my fatherly blessing on you surpass the blessing of my ancestors. So he's saying, Joseph, you deserve more than any of our generation for what you've done. The grace and the love and what you've learned from God, it should be more than Abraham, more than Isaac, more than me. And then he does something really amazing here. Surpass the blessings of my ancestors, my fathers literally, reaching to the heights of the eternal hills. What's that? What are the eternal hills? It's what? It's really tempting to say, well, he's giving us a hint at heaven, right? The eternal hills where you will be. But they really haven't talked about this at all. But what this has been leading up to, we've been saying Shad, Shad, Shad over and over again. So what do you imagine an eternal hill is? It's a shad. It's a mountain. So this is the way their poetry works, and hopefully we could get it. When they're talking about mighty, when they talk about providing, when they talk about the history of the relationship, he has poetically been invoking the name of God. They would have heard that. And so now he's sort of laying it out. May you be eternally in God's presence. May you be eternally provided for by the mountain, by the breast. I mean, it's a little earthy for us, but it's all of that. May you, Joseph, find this place where you're always blessed by God. And it's interesting, they do it by a mountain illusion. Certainly the Jewish rabbis think this is a reference to the temple and stuff later on. I think it's much deeper. I think it's that place where we go to be with God. Whether it's Christ up on our cross, whether it's New Jerusalem, it is reference to the ultimate place of blessing we're supposed to be. May these blessings rest upon the head of Joseph, who is prince among his brothers. Only poetic thing I can bring out there, and I'm not sure it's implied, but prince is the word sar, and it shows up in Isaiah. It's one of the titles for Jesus. So he is the Sar Shalom. He is the Prince of Peace. And this is the same word. So I don't know. But we're going to talk about it next month in the sermons. But one of the points of Sabbath, the way you end a Sabbath biblically, is to bless. Specifically, grandparents blessing their children. We've talked about that a little bit, but I'd love that to become my habit when I'm a grandparent. Sort of every Sunday, you call your grandkids and you talk to them about, I see this in you. This is a great quality. Maybe you should watch out for this. But you know what? May God bless you. May you prosper. May you do well. Just all the goodness that we can take from ourselves and shower that on our kids. And then Benjamin. So we haven't heard much of Benjamin, right? Benjamin's the little brother. He's been fought over, but he hasn't said much. He's just been kind of an instant or bystander. One of the things to know about later Jewish history is that Benjamites are the villains. They are seen as the most dishonest, left-handed. They actually call them left-handed, implying that they're cheats, they're liars. It gets really bad in Judges, and the other tribes will go to war and try to wipe out Benjamin. So you have 11 tribes trying to kill one tribe. There's a lot of history that goes on, and it's all in the future for us, but it really resounds truthfully here when Jacob says, Benjamin is a ravenous wolf, devouring his enemy in the morning and dividing his plunder in the evening. Okay, everybody else was a donkey, and one guy was a snake, but you're a wolf. King Saul, remember him? He will come from Benjamin. So Benjamin is the smallest and the worst. It's like that old saying, "Oh Lord, don't let my daughter marry an oil field worker," right? So the saying is, "Oh God, don't let my child marry a Benjamite." Interesting. So, but finishing up, 28. These are the 12 tribes of Israel. And this is what their father said as he told his sons goodbye. He blessed each one with an appropriate message. So we're not sure whether we've heard the message or there was something further that wasn't included to us. Then Jacob instructed them, "Soon I will die and join my ancestors. Bury me with my father and grandfather in the cave in the field of Ephron the Hittite. This is the cave in the field of Machpelah, near Mamre in Canaan, that Abraham bought from Ephron the Hittite as a permanent burial site. Remember, he's asked this of Joseph before. Don't bury me in Egypt. Our promise with God was for a specific land, and I want to go back to that land. He confessed to Joseph, I didn't do this with your mother, and I should have done it. It was a mistake. There Abraham and his wife Sarah are buried. There Isaac and his wife Rebekah are buried. There I buried Leah, but he left out Rachel. It is the plot of land in that cave that my grandfather Abraham bought from the Hittites. So this is a huge ask. And it really, I don't get it so much, but the Hebrew mind does. Their covenant with God was tied to land. This place will later be known as Hebron. They say Hebron. And today there is still a sacred site on top of this cave. And unlike 99% of the stuff that you find in Israel, this is probably legitimate. We have a picture of it. This is very, very much fought over today in Israel. It technically is in the West Bank, so under Palestinian control. But when the Israeli army withdrew from it, Palestinians went in and destroyed most of the sanctuary. So the Israelis today have an army unit that does nothing but defend this cave. So there's maybe 800 Israelis that live in Hebron today. There's something like 30,000, 40,000 Palestinians. But they won't give up the cave because of this. This is the tie. This is the first place that they ever went. I've never been able to go. It's on my bucket list, but it's not on I'm going to get killed for list. You know what I mean? So this spot can be really, really dangerous because they fight over it. Like they throw rocks and the Israeli army will shoot them, and it's terrible. You know, if we think more in terms of heaven or the garden or New Jerusalem or the kingdom of God, but for them, that's where it all started. So they're way down in Egypt. They want Dad to load up the body, travel all the way back up here, renegotiate with the Canaanites, let us go back into this cave. This is a big ask. 33, when Jacob had finished this charge to his sons, he drew his feet up into his bed, breathed his last, and joined his ancestors in death. So make sure before you die, you put your socks on and pull up your feet, and don't die with your feet hanging out. So one last hill, chapter 50. Joseph threw himself on his father and wept over him and kissed him. We've seen Joseph do this a few times. It's not typical for their culture. They're not really crying people. But I think Joseph gets a pass in my mind because the guy has had a rough life. Amen? And he probably thinks about all the time he didn't have with his father. He's had some years since he's been in Egypt, but most of his adult life was apart from Dad. Then Joseph told the physicians who served him to embalm his father's body. So again, very typical for an Egyptian. This was very, very expensive in Egypt. One of the reasons you would serve the king is that he would pay for your embalming. Not all Egyptians could afford it, and there are ranks of embalming. And realize the Egyptians believe that you require your body in order to have an afterlife. If your body is destroyed, then your soul has no place to go, and so you're consigned to hell, their version of it. Obviously, none of this matters for Jacob, but why would Joseph want the body embalmed? We got to take it up to Canaan. We got to put it in a cave. So the embalming process took the usual 40 days. So again, this is very, very expensive. There was a study done just a few years ago where they were looking at the chemical uh, analysis of the resins that they're putting on the mummy. I won't bore you with all the horrible details of how they mummify you, but one of the things that were really expensive were the ointments that they would put on to preserve the body. And this study had looked at the ingredients, and it was insane. There were tree resins that were coming out of northern Syria, and to have those in large enough quantities to cover a body in Egypt is why it's incredibly expensive. The one issue that's still somewhat controversial is one of the spices originated in India. And they're not sure if they were sourcing it for India or it was being passed sort of in a trade relationship. But I say that just to underscore the incredible wealth that it took to be completely mummified, and that it's being extended to Jacob. And for all of his shepherd wealth, he's still a relative nobody. But his son is not. And the Egyptians mourned his death for 70 days, which is the Egyptian period of mourning. Why would the Egyptians care? Because of Joseph. His life has so blessed other peoples that what's important to Joseph was important to them. This is what I mean on a very small scale. Joseph really was a Christ-like character. He came back from the dead, if you will. He brought life to his family and to his traditional enemies. The world was better after Joseph. When the period of mourning was over, Joseph approached Pharaoh's advisors and said, "Please do me this favor and speak to Pharaoh on my behalf. Tell him that my father made me swear an oath. He said to me, 'Listen, I'm about to die. Take my body back to the land of Canaan and bury me in the tomb I prepared for myself.'" It's interesting. They're showing that Joseph is very truthful because he repeats the promise, but he changes the end. And he's brilliant for doing this. He says to the Egyptians, "My father has prepared to bury him in the tomb I prepared for him." This is what makes an Egyptian a good person, that you bury your father in the tomb. It's not really a tomb, not in any sense like an Egyptian would build a tomb. It's a cave where they're going to let his body decompose. But I think when he said tomb, and the Egyptians are thinking, "Yeah, I get that. That's what we do." Okay, Joseph. So he's a brilliant guy. He really is. "So please allow me to go and bury my father. After his burial, I will return without delay." Pharaoh agreed to Joseph's request. "Go and bury your father, as you made your promise," he said. So Joseph went up to bury his father. He was accompanied by all of Pharaoh's officials, all the senior members of Pharaoh's household, which has to include wives and sons. This is extraordinary. And all the senior officers of Egypt. Now, Joseph is vizier, so these are all technically under him. Pharaoh doesn't go, but that would be inappropriate for Pharaoh to go. But, weeks, and probably longer, because they're traveling sort of with everybody in state. So this is 2 months going and getting it all done and getting back. This is a big, big deal. And the Egyptians are showing up for Joseph to respect his father. If you had told me that any Egyptian officials would travel into Canaan to bury a shepherd, I told you you're crazy. Remember, they don't like shepherds. They won't even eat with them. But they'll do it for Joseph. They'll go up to Canaan for Joseph. Now again, we wonder at the time period when Joseph is vizier, if it was under the period where Egypt actually controlled Canaan. Canaan was a colony of Egypt, but the Egyptians were very much hands-off. They would have garrison in some big towns, but remember, Egyptians don't want to live anywhere other than Egypt. And they have kind of this fear that if you die in a foreign land and they can't get your body back, that you're not going to have a good afterlife. So an Egyptian always wants to be buried in Egypt. So they would have very much gotten that this man wants to be buried in his land. So they wanted to go back. But they're willing to travel all this way. If it's not under Egyptian control, this may have just really kind of been a military exercise where the Egyptian army, and maybe that's why they're saying the senior officers are coming out, where they're going to force the issue. No negotiating with the Canaanites. This cave is Joseph's. Let him put his body in there. I know this was a huge deal. I don't know how huge a deal it was, whether it was still part of their empire or if it was outside of their territory. But I know Moses put this in here to really show us how deeply they loved Joseph. So continue on. Joseph also took his entire household and his brothers and their household, but they left the little children and flocks and herds in the land of Goshen. And the Egyptians said, "Thank you very much." The great number of chariots and charioteers accompanied Joseph. And again, these are incredibly expensive in the ancient world. It's either these are state troops. I mean, these are the elite of the Egyptian army, or they could be noblemen themselves. Those are the only people that can afford to keep horses, to keep multiple teams of horses, to take care of the chariot. So again, it's almost like the entire upper aristocracy of Egypt is going with Joseph. And they're not just going down the street to bury his dad. They're going with him into Canaan, a place they would never want to go. So when they arrived at the threshing floor of Atad, near the Jordan River. So in Hebrew, this is the Goren Ha-Atad. I didn't put it. So Goren is just a threshing floor. Everybody know what a threshing floor is? It's kind of like the gin. Small Texas towns, where does everybody go to hang out? The gin. I mean, threshing floors are a big deal in the ancient world. It's where you come to separate the grain. So Atad is a word for weeds, for bramble. And I don't know what all this is. So they go to a place where they have the threshing floor of weeds. If I didn't know better, I would think this is an Egyptian derogatory name for this place. We're going with Joseph, but he's taking us in the hood. He's taking us to the bad part of town. We never have it referred to again. I don't know what Moses' hearers would have made of this, but it's really unusual. And I wish they would translate the Atad, because threshing floor of Atad just sounds like a place. But they're making some kind of point. Threshing floor of the weeds? I don't know. They held a very great and solemn memorial service with a 7-day period of mourning for Joseph's father. Again, this is how long Egyptians usually have funerals. Egyptians have big professions. They make a big deal out of the funerals. And then they'll stay and eat meals with the dead, which I think is weird. But I wonder if that's some of what's going on. The local residents, the Canaanites, watched this, and you better believe this was what everybody was talking about. What are the Egyptians doing here? What are all these Egyptians doing here? What are all these rich Egyptians doing here? Are they invading us? Are they? And so here's the joke, or here's the punch. The local Canaanites watched them mourning at the threshing floor of weeds. So maybe the cave is run down? I don't know. But they do this. They renamed the place, which is near the Jordan. And it's interesting Moses keeps doing that, to tell us by the Jordan, because I don't think this threshing floor is there. His people don't recognize it. But, which is near the Jordan River, and they named it Avel Mizraim. So Mizraim is the Hebrew word for Egypt, or Egyptians, it's plural. And Abel, we might remember Cain and Abel. It means tears, memorial, place of weeping, mourning. So it's the place of tears of the Egyptians. Now, obviously, the Canaanites can't tell, there's more than Egyptians that are doing this. It's Joseph and his family. It's interesting, they don't invite the Canaanites over to, Egyptians have no use for them whatsoever. They kill babies, they're crazy. But wow, what a funeral. That your child has been so good, blessed so many lives, that people travel a long distance into a foreign land. And bless your father because of you. And then Moses adds this. This is a place of deep mourning for these Egyptians. One of the really annoying things, I think, about the Middle East, have you ever heard the wail of Arab women? I'm talking about the, oh my gosh. So, unfortunately, I think that began in Egypt. We don't know for sure, but we know, like I said, the Egyptians made a big, big deal out of the funerals. And they would go on for a long time. And the Egyptians always wanted people to cry at your funeral. And so you had to, like the Hebrews, you put sand on your head, and you would weep, and you would weep. And we start reading in the tombs that the Egyptians hired professional mourners. So these are women whose whole job is to cry and wail, put ash in their hair, carry on at a funeral that you were so loved. I think it's annoying as all get out. But I think that's probably what Moses is referring to. The wailing of the ladies, crying at their funeral, was a little out of hand. I mean, Joseph and family probably were weeping on their own. But, the Egyptians spared no expense for Jacob's funeral here. And so they probably did drag all these mourners all the way from Egypt. Can you imagine your business card? I'm a professional mourner. I just don't cry for anybody. I get paid for it. So verse 12, so Jacob's sons did as he commanded them. They carried his body to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave in the field of Machpelah near Mamre, which is a big tree. This is the cave that Abraham had bought as a permanent burial site from Ephron the Hittite. After burying Jacob, Joseph returned to Egypt with his brothers and all who had accompanied him to bury his father. But now that their father was dead, Joseph's brothers became fearful. Now Joseph will show his anger and pay us back for all the wrong we did to him, they said. So they sent this message to Joseph. Before your father died, he instructed us to say to you, please forgive your brothers for the great wrong they did to you, for their sin in treating you so cruelly. So what did they just do? They lied. Yep. Aren't family funerals fun? Just when you think it's all over, everybody's in the ground, it's all over, and the weird, ugly of families come out. And well, I think they did mean that they really wanted to be forgiven, but they didn't have to lie and say, Dad told you to. They could have apologized themselves. And they kind of do. They kind of do. So again, it's the vav that we've always talked about. It's the but in Hebrew, that little letter V, vav. So continuing, we, the servants of the God of your father, and this is important for us, hopefully as First Methodists. They are saying we are servants. We are these avad. We are the ones that God said we should be in the garden. Avad, servants, priests. a bringer forth of life. Now, are they really servants? No. Joseph really is a servant. And in a sense, he's tried to help them become servants. So they're saying the words that we are the Zavad of El Shaddai, of Father Jacob. We beg you to forgive our sin. Now that seems legit. You didn't have to lie and tell all the crap before. They're admitting it was a sin, and they're asking for forgiveness. When Joseph received this message, he broke down and wept. Poor guy. I mean, he has dealt with his family. You know, the only thing that makes him cry is his family. Egyptian torture, he got it. Famine, no problem. But my family just about killed me. It does show that ugly side of them. It's still kind of there. And let's be honest, even when we forgive somebody that has really hurt us, we're always kind of fearful that behavior is going to come back. Then his brothers came and threw themselves down before Joseph. Look, we are your slaves. And again, I wish for a little more consistency here. This is Avad again. This is not Eved. This is, we are your servant slaves. It can mean either. But Joseph replied, don't be afraid of me. Am I God, that I can punish you? You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. Wow. That you can get to this place in life, that I'm not God. Life was not the way that I would have chosen, but God was with me, and through it all, he strengthened me. And he not only got me to a position of power where I could help people, but he helped develop my soul, so that when I was in a position of power, I wasn't like you. Because what would have happened if one of the other brothers had been the vizier of Egypt? How would that famine have gone, right? It would have been a bloodbath if Reuben or Simeon or Levi had been the one. So profound wisdom that was born of a lot of pain. Joseph took the evil of life, and he was able to return it with good. Again, I see a little example of Christ in this. Christ took the evil of the whole world, and he could say to the Romans, to Caiaphas, to the others, you intended my crucifixion as an evil act. But God has made it good, has become the source of life. Incredible moment. Do it? Yes. God, brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people. Not just my family, not just my own sons, not just my wife, people. He saved the life of Egyptians. Obviously, they love him. He saved the life of his family. He saved lives of Canaanites. He has saved life, which I think is, we've talked about really what his Egyptian name meant. And God said, may he live. And he has made that possible. No, don't be afraid. I will continue to take care of you and your children. So be reassured. So he reassured them by speaking kindly to them. So he didn't do it just because his dad was watching. He didn't do it because he would get in trouble. He was graceful and merciful in the end. So Joseph and his brothers and their families continued to live in Egypt. Joseph lived to the age of 110, which is a long time, so it shows a blessing. Incidentally, it's the ideal Egyptian lifespan. An Egyptian wants to live 110 years, so he did that. Is it as much as his dad? No. And you see that consistent pattern. Each generation is a little less. So he's further from the garden, but certainly a righteous man. He lived to see 3 generations of descendants of his sons Ephraim, which it probably comes from this, but there's a Jewish belief that if you see 3 generations, they say it, if you're the 4th generation, So you can look down and see 3 generations, which would be great-grandkids. It's God saying that you were righteous. Now, it's just coming from this, but it is a great mark of distinction, that he lived a long, long time, and his sons had sons, and their sons had sons. And in their definition of tov, right, good, this is really, really good. Another little interesting story, and he lived to see the birth of the children of Manasseh's son, Machir, whom he claimed as his own. Literally in Hebrew says, were born on his knee, which is a way of claiming adoption. Nobody was really born on anybody's knees. They didn't let the men in there. But it's a way of saying that he must have had a very special relationship with Manasseh's grandsons. And I love that about Joseph. I mean, he probably was retired as vizier. They can't, it's like running a country. You can't do that forever. He still stayed focused on his family. 24, soon I will die, Joseph told his brothers, but God will surely come to help you and lead you out of this land of Egypt. He will bring you back to the land he solemnly promised to give Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear an oath, and he said, when God comes to help you and lead you back, you must take my bones with you. So Joseph died at the age of 110. The Egyptians embalmed him, and his body was placed in a coffin in Egypt. And we read when Moses leaves, he actually takes the body, takes the mummy of Joseph back to Hebron. And thus, part 1 ends. So, whew. Yay. Yeah, we did it. Thank you, guys. 2 years, 6 months. So, yes. Yeah, they were wandering around. So the question is, what about Rachel? Why wasn't she buried in the cave? And remember, Jacob confessed, she died suddenly. I was grief-stricken, and so we buried her on the side of the road. And so it was a mistake. He should have, but I think he was so upset because it was her, he just buried her. Now, there is a later tradition that she is buried in the cave. They went back and got the bones and all that. I don't have any way to prove that or disprove that. When you ask a Jew in Israel, is Rachel in the cave, they say yes. So, although we've never found any bones in the cave. So, but they get a little grumpy when I say, let me go in and do a dig and find Abraham's bones. So they don't like that. But yeah. So, was Joseph worth it? I think he was. Pointing us both in the prophecy for Judah, but some of Joseph too, of who the Shiloh will be, who will take the evil of the world and make it good, who will bring life when people want to bring evil. Definitely one of the guys I want to have lunch with in heaven. Moses and Joshua. And make an appointment with Jesus, but those are probably hard to get, right? So, yeah, sure, come along. Like we've joked about, I wonder how that discussion will go between Joseph and Moses, right? Moses, let me tell you what happened. Joseph said, it went nothing like that. You got it completely wrong. Who are you listening to? It's amazing that this story has resounded, like for 3.5 millennia. We hear the story of a little shepherd who rose to great prominence. The search is always afoot to find Egyptian evidence of Joseph in Egypt. We're not there yet. I think it's possible one day we may get there. Like we talked about, there were other Egyptian viziers that were foreign-born. There was a Syrian one we know very well named Bey, but it's much later. It can't be Joseph. So we know it happened. Sometimes you see specials on TV where one guy says he's found Joseph's statue because it's wearing a Semite cloak and it's a multicolored cloak. I'd love to say he's right, but when I put my archaeological hat on, it's not enough evidence, just that he wore this coat of many colors. We don't know. It's possible. One of the things the Egyptian government did, actually, 20 years ago, when I was still in school, they forced all the new archaeological digs to be in the north of Egypt instead of the south. Now, the south was much easier to dig because it's very dry and it preserves everything. In the delta, like where Goshen is, it's very wet, and so it has a relatively high water table. So you dig down so far, and then you have to pump out the water. And of course, the water destroys papyrus, a lot of organic material. It's much harder. You still find things. Egypt is crazy with archaeological finds, but it's not as rich as the south. But the Egyptian forced them. They have to spend more money, and you have to dig up there. And a lot is come to light, more than really I can keep up with, about the Delta and about Goshen, and specifically the digs in Avaris, which is what the archaeological name for the capital of Goshen is, Pi-Ramses. So they can say for certain that there were Semitic-style houses in Goshen at this time period. So if we take a typical Canaanite house and how they built it, it's sort of a four-room house with a courtyard, and it has certain distinctive door patterns and stuff. They found those in Egypt. So we can say conclusively there were Semites in Avaris at this time. There are a lot of donkeys and a lot of donkey burials, which Egyptians don't bury donkeys. They don't like donkeys. They like boats. So that's very unusual. And of course, we did find a seal inscription of the name Jacob El, Yaakov El. Now, it wasn't our Jacob, but it was another Semite with the name Yaakov, which is Jacob. And he was a follower of El, right? So, which El? Here we go again. But so the Bible is right on. It's matching the details we have. We just maybe haven't got that final piece. I don't know if we ever will. We do tend to have a lot about viziers in Egypt because they are so important figures. Have a lot of tombs of viziers. Wow, would love to find if they built one for Joseph. I think he was in it before they took him to Canaan. So we'll keep looking. But yes, ma'am. Yes. That's exactly my argument too. Right. So her question is, if this guy supposedly has found the statue of Joseph and he's wearing the multicolored robe in the statue, didn't the brothers destroy it? Didn't the brothers take it from him when they sold him into slavery? Yeah, proof that he got killed. So I guess the argument would be he loved it so much that when he immortalized himself, he made it on him. But it's a stretch. You see what I mean? And Christians don't need to get into what I consider pious fraud. We're so eager, so faithful to believe something that may or may not be true. We have plenty to rely on. This is true and accurate, far more than we need miracle discoveries. But yeah. No, not at all. In this case, it's a financial decision. They want to spread the tourism all around Egypt, and so when you find new sites, it opens up tourism in different places, and so the Egyptians want you to spend your money from north to south. Yes. It's I don't know if it'll ever stop, but. And remember, 10% of the population in Egypt is Christian. They are persecuted, but they hang on, and they certainly embrace the story of Joseph. You know, even Islam, in a fashion, embraces the story of Joseph and Moses, even. So they don't have a problem with Musa. That's what they call Moses, Musa. Maybe one day we'll get to go to Goshen. If the wars are ever over, we could take a little excursion, and we could go down to Goshen. Yeah, it would be a shock for us, but obviously God has plans, and we need to let those plans happen. So. Well, it started with this family, but obviously it hasn't ended. It's still continuing in Midland, Texas. So remember your rotten family. God loves them too. That's what I try to do. I don't know. So anyway, well, we've run a little over, but we got there. So we'll meet again in August. Hopefully I'll see all you guys, but thank you for this, and we'll go until God says come. So, amen. Let's pray. Father God, we do praise you, bless you for your word. We thank you for the special chance we've had to really walk with you, to walk with Abraham, to live in this world, to have your grace spilled out to us in a very real, powerful way. We thank you, O Lord, that you have loved us as humans a lot longer than we imagine. Your hope, your desire, your patience, your continued hesed love for us doesn't end. That when it went wrong in the garden, you immediately went to work and created a new covenant. As we continue to try to pull away, O Lord, as we find new ways to sin and be horrible, you find new ways to bring us closer, to hug us deeper, to share more love with us. May we never forget that we make real choices. We can be a monster like Reuben, or we can be a Joseph. We know, O Lord, we have been hurt and will be hurt. And anger rises up in us, and we become those vipers and wolves that you warned the tribes about. Help us to remember Joseph in the end. The things may go wrong. People may do evil acts. But through your power and relying on our covenant, we can make it something